that he didn't use that we wanted him. Gentlemen, and it's lovely to see so many of you here tonight. Can I just start off by asking how many people here are not UKIP members, if you could show your hands. Well, that's great. I think that's pretty much half the audience. And you're the ones we're going to be love bombing tonight and trying to twist your arms and see if we can sign you up by the end of the night. No pressure. A week ago this evening, I was a bit of a nervous man because it was the day before the second television debate between Nigel and Nick. And Nigel Farage had clearly won the first debate, but he felt he was a little bit frustrated that it was a win on points when really he wanted to deliver a knockout blow. So we spent the Monday and Tuesday at Party HQ in London really going through a lot of the lines we thought Nick Clegg might come up with, guessing his demeanour, that because he'd lost he would probably be quite aggressive and quite personal, and indeed he was. We got that right. Nigel was so hyped up by the day of the debate that he actually went to the extraordinary lengths of foregoing his pre-debate pint of bitter. And I think he held Nick Clegg personally responsible for that pleasure being denied him, which might explain what happened afterwards. Now, I brought along something tonight which might make a little auction prize for the branch. And I think there's only about 3 or 4 or more of these in existence. And these are the final round of briefing papers that we persuaded Nigel to take in with him for the second debate, really sort of honing down. There were hundreds of pages of briefings about, you know, the car industry, the European Court of Human Rights, heaven alone knows what else, but we honed it down to a couple of sort of slim documents that Nigel doesn't usually like to take in sheets of paper before a debate because he has a very good memory and he doesn't like to be over-rehearsed and he finds it stilted. But he said to me and Tim and a few others, you know, this guy Clegg is so slippery and so shameless, I really am going to bring in a few things so we can really nail him. But has the sacrifice really been worth their while? And we spoke, and Nigel spoke in the debate about it's many of those working class British families who are truly patriotic and believe in their nation, who've been sent out to fight in these conflicts for no obvious return. So we didn't back down at all on foreign policy. And I don't know how many of you watched the kind of after-show TV coverage, but I was one of the spin doctors, and Kay Burley immediately latched onto this and predicted we'd be in big trouble on Sky News, this was, and would have to back down. And it's a bit of a blur, but I believe I told her that I was convinced that Nigel and UKIP had won by a bigger margin than the week before. And shortly after I told her that, her earpiece sounded, and she read out the results of the polls, and seemed flabbergasted that this was indeed the case. I said, that's a lovely piece of live TV, Kay, and she promptly turned on her heels and started to persecute a man called Danny Alexander from the Liberal Democrats. Now, I've told you about the foreign policy thing because I think it's one of the keys to UKIP, that the other parties, or the one entity, and I apologise to any supporters of the other parties in the audience. I'm not going to get too personal tonight, but we're going to have some genuine political debate. So in UKIP, many of us refer to the other 3 parties as one monstrous entity, the Lib Lab Con. And the thing about UKIP is that they don't like is we are offering people different political choices. Many of these choices, the first time people have had them for a decade or more, and they're choices that shouldn't have been removed from the ballot paper at all, and we're going to be putting them back there. So far from being a racist party or a homophobic party or an extremist party in any way at all, the truth about UKIP is that we're going to be putting common sense back on the ballot paper, and that's what the other parties don't like. So in foreign policy, for a start, there was some common sense and putting Britain first. But there are many, many other areas where UKIP takes one position and the Lib Lab Con take another. And we can start off by the fact of Britain's membership of the European Union at a cost of £55 million a day going into the coffers of Brussels. All the other parties, the other 3, are all in favour of membership, and we're against it. And because we're against it, something else follows from that. and that is that under a UKIP regime, Britain could take back control of its own borders. At the moment, under EU freedom of movement laws, and I think this message has really hit home now, for more than 24 of our neighbouring countries, there are no controls on immigration at all. Now, UKIP is not an anti-immigration party, it's an anti-uncontrolled immigration party. And what Britain and the British public want, I believe, when it comes to immigration, is not zero immigration. Nobody wants a closed door, nobody wants to turn Britain into Europe's version of North Korea, for goodness sake. What we want for every country in the world is volume control and quality control on immigration into this country. We want to be able to choose some of the best and brightest people in the world and welcome them in. We want to be able to say congratulations and well done to migrants who come in and adopt British values, invest in Britain, create employment in Britain and pay much more into the pot than they ever take out. We would like UKIP, in fact, to be the party that gives immigration a good name again in this country. But you can only do that if you have that volume control and quality control that has been so lacking for so many years because of our membership of the European Union. And another point that Nigel made in the debate was that because we have no controls whatsoever on the European Union, on 24 or more neighbouring countries, we've reached an absurd position where someone can come in from Eastern Europe with no talk about the number of migrants who work, and therefore say, well, that must be, therefore, a benefit to Britain. Well, it's not good enough. That's not enough, really, because Britain, thank goodness, has a highly developed welfare state and public services. They need paying for. So if someone comes in from another country, from Eastern Europe, into a minimum wage job, they'll only pay about £600 a year in income tax, and perhaps the same again in national insurance. If they even have 2 children, then simply the child benefit bill for those 2 children will outweigh their entire tax contribution, and that's before you start talking about £5,000 for a school place each year, another £500 or £600 on top for the pupil premium for coming from a low-income background, the cost of the NHS, the roads, the police, the other public services. Now, it's no wonder that those big multinational companies, some of whom don't pay much tax at all, are pro-uncontrolled immigration, because what do they get out of it? They get cheap labour, and it's the British taxpayer who gets fleeced. Now, UKIP is saying that's got to stop, and because we believe in taking Britain out of the European Union, we can have an immigration policy that involves Britain controlling its own borders.